Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of What the Field. I'm Emmeline.
And I am Gonzalo. I am a farmer and co-founder of crowd farming.
Today we will be talking about climate change and forest fires with Emilio Chuvieco. Hello, Emilio, and welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Who is joining us? Well, actually, he's a top scientific profile. We're very, very proud that he's here with us. It's a great honor, actually. For those of you who don't know, Emilio Chuvieco is the coordinator of the European Union's FirEUrisk prevention program.
Actually, I'm one of the coordinators.
You're one of
the science leader, let's say.
Okay, okay. And a professor of geography, winner of the prize of the Spanish Environmental Protection Prize, which is Jaume I of this year, actually.
Yes.
So very new prize. Congratulations.
Jaume Primero.
Jaume
Jaime
I have to say their Spanish
Jaume,
names.
Jaume is the first. Jaime Primero.
So maybe let's repeat that. What it's called correctly, you're the winner of the most important Spanish prize for environmental protection. This year's winner. Prize is called
Rey Jaume I. This is actually indicated in Valencia, the local language of the region. So
Especially proud of this.
Especially proud of this, just hard to pronounce for us non-Spanish people. And Emilio, you are also a coordinator, or at least an important participant of the European Space Program.
Space Agency.
Space Agency Program, that's it. Maybe you could elaborate a bit on that?
Sure. I am the science leader of the Fire Climate Change Initiative Program. This is a large program of the European Space Agency that deals with generating global variables related to climate change from satellite data. And I am coordinating the Fire one.
And you're also the author of over 30 books and over 400 scientific papers. So again, congratulations. Very impressive curriculum. Gonzalo, you might want to add something, I think.
Thank you very much for your patience and for dedicating time to us. Your presence here in this podcast is really important because one of the main things for crowd farming is to be the most trusted marketplace, and having the opportunity of interviewing someone like you to spread the word about what you are doing and to have like a scientific point of view about climate change. That is a topic you are aware that many people are talking. We just want to share the word of proven scientific people, of the scientific community.
Yes, that's right. Because nowadays, actually, climate change is something everybody seems to talk about on all levels of society. And we were wondering, how long has climate change actually been a subject that is studied on a scientific level?
Well, climate change treaty, the United Nations Framework for Climate Change, was signed in the Earth Summit of Rio de Janeiro in 1992. And since then, there has been official, let's say, agreements, the different countries trying to do something about climate change. The scientific understanding of the issue came a bit earlier than that, of course, but politically, say, it started in 1992.
So it's been studied for over 30 years,
Yes.
And we still haven't acted all that much, no?
Well, we are doing something, but not enough. That would be the summary.
And when did it become, I think this is one of the topics that Gonzalo loves to debate, when did it become more of a societal issue on which everyone has an opinion? When did it become such a public part of our agendas?
Well, difficult to say that, but in my point of view, there has been, particularly in the US, a very strong political bias towards climate change. And to me, it's a pity because it's a scientific issue that has been politicized, and therefore the opinions about the issue are not so much driven by scientists, but rather by politicians. And depending on your ideology, you tend to be in one side or the other. And
Exactly.
this political debate is somehow hidden the science base. And this again is a really a pity because it's a scientific issue. So I think we should listen people that are really studying that rather than those that are providing their own opinions, which are in many cases driven by their own ideologies and their own agendas.
And as you said, Emilio, it's actually, I think it's very tragic, no? That depending on whether you consider yourself or whether you identify as more left-wing or right-wing, it seems it automatically comes with a stand on climate change, which is really a great shame because do you think that it hinders the progress towards...
This has been particularly an issue in the US, not so much in Europe. Keep in mind that the governments that push ahead the climate change agenda were mostly right politicians in Europe. I mean, starting from Margaret Thatcher, for instance, and following by Merkel and many other, let's say, center or center-right politicians. It has been much more in the US because climate change was somehow let's say, one of the political backgrounds of the Democratic Party, and therefore the Republicans are, by definition, against that. And this is really a pity because, again, climate change is something that is affecting everyone, not just people of the left or the right. No, it's something that all citizens are going to somehow be affected by. And the companies, obviously, some of them have a lot of interest on preventing climate change initiatives. I mean, obviously, the oil industry and all the people related to those fossil fuel combustion. But there are many others, like yourself, for instance, that are taking advantage of climate change research, and they are taking their own leadership on that regard, and they are being now, let's say, the leaders of emission reductions. And also they are investing in the future because they know the future will be different. The climate will be different, and they are taking their own measurements to adapt to those situations. So I would say that the scientists on one hand and many businessmen on the other are really taking seriously what climate change is. And the general people, I would say that depends very much on your own ideology, but also on the evidence. Climate change is something that is not happening every day, of course, but we are now analyzing or feeling, let's say, more and more impacts of climate change. And this summer has been particularly clear in Spain, has been the warmest summer in record in Spain. So when everybody talks about climate change, it's because it's probably too late to take measurements. That's one of the main issues. We need really to be concerned about that and to take much more ambitious measurements to mitigate wherever possible.
What do you think is the impact of the climate skeptics and global warming deniers that exist even in Europe? Do you think that they have too big a space in the public debate and maybe hinder too many solutions or mitigation?
Much less in Europe than in the US, but also in Europe. Well, part of your business is related to the internet, so I'm not going to criticize the internet, of course.
You can.
But yeah, we're open here.
But I'm obviously very open to internet, but obviously every new technology has pros and cons. And the con in this case is that everybody can say whatever they like. In the old ages, only few people could write books. Editorial companies only publish books to people who know about things. But now you can put your own video or your own tweet, whatever you want to say. I mean, there are people who even defend that the earth is flat, and they have their own followers,
Sure, the flat earthers.
Yes, yeah, that's the point, no? Yeah. So sometimes many people, instead of going to the original sources, they go to who is more influential. And I am a bit concerned about that because we are losing literacy, even in Europe, on that regard, no? We need to be more critics about the sources of data. Actually, yesterday, a colleague of mine from the university, who is a law PhD student, he was asking me about climate change, and he said, well, but there is a lot of controversy, there are people who say this and that, and I say, well, if you are interested to know about climate, what should be the source? Well, you go to the web webs of the main meteorological centers. No, I mean Meteo France, the Spanish Agency of Meteorology, the NOAA, and what do they say? So all opinions are to be respected, but not all opinions are to be regarded, no? Or to be listened, of course.
Speaking of listening, what do you think that we can do as a society to get to the point where we listen more to scientists and less to what random people on social media say, what politicians say, all of that? How can we turn scientists, as Gonzalo always said, into actual influencers?
Your question, how can we turn farmers into be more influencers, and how can we turn scientists into be more influencers?
The people that are actually in the field of the things that matter, right?
Yeah, actually, farmers are a good source of information about climate change because they know what is happening. No, they know what are the changes in temperatures, in rainfall. I mean the early springs. So they know because they are in the field. They observe reality. Many times, unfortunately, decisions are taken by urban people that are not very much in relation to nature, but you are in relation.
We have a farmer here.
Yeah, the first conversation that I have about climate change, it was not in the city or it was not in an office. It was in a countryside, in a farm, hearing to old farmers or elderly farmers that were asking, okay, this plant is not good for the future because the climate is getting warmer, so you should plant new varieties that could accept or are good for temperatures over 40 degrees.
Yeah, and the dry climate. And Gonzalo, you as a farmer on your own fields in Valencia, have you noticed changes in the past years?
Well, of course, I have been, like Emilio was saying, this last summer was the hottest summer in more than 100. Well, I can share like real examples. For example, the honey harvest that we have been able to harvest during the summer is this year was 1.4 kilos per chamber, per honey chamber. Okay, usually we get like 15 or even 20. So this year we have like 15 times less than other summers, no? Because of flower, it was so hot that all the flowers didn't have enough time to mature and to get the nectar and the pollen. So
didn't develop any.
The bees couldn't obtain the nectar, no?
Particularly in the springtime, it has very warm in the springtime.
Yeah.
That it was one of the issues there.
Yeah.
The thing with the temperatures and what you mentioned earlier, okay, anyone who is doubting climate change should just go look up meteorological sites that are tracking temperature changes in Europe or in the world. And what do you say to people who then tell you, yes, but this year was the hottest, but there will always be a new record, and this is just 1 year, and how is this an indicator of climate change?
This is because now we are measuring, and 50 years ago we were not measuring.
Exactly, and they're like, oh, and it's natural. And the other famous argument is it natural, or it is natural that we have climate changes? That doesn't mean they're man-made. It doesn't mean we can impact them, and temperatures have always changed. You know, the typical arguments, right?
Sure. No, I would recommend two simple things. One is to look at the sources of the data, so the meteorological centers, because they record the data, and then you can see beyond your own feelings what are the actual data. And then the second advice, would be to be conscious about what is driven climate. And obviously, in the past, we have a lot of climate changes that are caused by the changes in orbital conditions of the Earth. We know about that. There was a Serbian cosmologian called Milankovic that described that there are cycles every 100,000 years, every 40,000 years, every 20,000 years. And if you put together all these cycles, you very clearly reconstruct the ice and frozen, let's say, periods in the last million of years. But we are not observing that now. The sun radiation is not changing. It's changing every 11 years with this cycle of 11 years, but it's not in in a rising trend, if you don't have any natural explanation for that, then you have to look at other factors. And obviously now, not in the past, but now we observe that the main factors are the accumulation of greenhouse gases, which is obviously driven by human activity, particularly the burning of fossil fuels, plus agriculture and cattle production, of course.
Okay, speaking on the relation of climate change and agriculture, in how far does agriculture influence climate change for you?
Well, agriculture first, one direct impact is that many new crops are on previous forest lands, particularly in tropical regions. This is not happening in our climates, of course, but in the tropical regions, we do have deforestation. In the last years, particularly because of the expansion of soya, and soya is cropped because of the increasing consumption of meat, particularly in the Southeast Asia, China, India, etc. That's one point. In traditional agricultural areas, as our climate, for instance, Mediterranean region, depending on how do you crop, you can be positive or negative effects in terms of emissions. Rice, of course, is always a net source of emission because the methane that is driven related to crops that are flooded. But other type of crops are not only in negative, let's say, but they are also positive for climate change because they store carbon.
Carbon sinks, right? Instead of carbon switch.
For instance, these polycrops that are very traditional in the Mediterranean, combining, for instance, olive trees with vineyards. These are quite useful, and also the whole processing of the soil, the carbon on the soil is also very important. It's an important storage of carbon.
You were talking earlier about this summer having been the hottest recorded summer, at least in Spain, but I think also in other European countries. And actually, it was not the only issue this summer. The other issue was the wildfire occurrences all over Europe, especially in Spain, but also, for example, in France. There were an unusual amount, and they were unusually big and intensive this year. As an expert on wildfire, I mean, you do work to help the European Union prevent them, or at least lower the risk. Would you say that there's a demonstrable...
Or detect them.
Yeah,
How to act.
The detection.
Detection and know how to act.
But would you say that there's a relation between the increase of these wildfire occurrences and climate change?
Yeah, I think there is a high likelihood that there is a direct connection between the two. Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece have a long tradition of having fires because we have a very dry summer. But what we observe is these fires are becoming more relevant in Central Europe, even in Northern Europe. This summer has been particularly bad in France, as you said, in the western side of France, but also in Central Germany. They have strong fires in the eastern side of Germany, plus Poland and the Czech Republic. And this is not very usual at all. So they are now trying to learn from the Mediterranean experience because we have a long tradition of fighting forest fires and prevention forest fires. Now what we are observing is that the heat waves are much longer and much more frequent than in the past, and that implies the vegetation is very dry, and therefore whenever you have strong winds, you may have very difficult conditions to fight fires. So the project, our participation in the project is more related to fire prevention, fire risk assessment, not so much about fire extinction purpose. We are not experts on fire brigades, let's say, but more in the determination of when and where the fire is more likely to occur. And it is important to be prepared and also to educate people living in the countryside to be more concerned about the use of machinery. For instance, some of the large fires this summer have been caused by accidents using agricultural machinery, for instance. Last year we had the largest fire, more than 25,000 hectares, was caused by a car accident. So fires can occur in many different reasons. The point is that the level of dryness of vegetation is so low that everything can cause a fire. These fires can be very severe with a lot of energy, and very quick fires, very difficult to stop.
I am very curious about what can we do as farmers to prevent these these fires that are wildfires that are occurring. No? Is there a correlation between the way of farming, like we say, okay, if we do regenerative organic farming, can we say that we are preventing wildfires to occur? And also, how much water are we using? This was a discussion that we have before, and it's something that I don't know if there is a scientific studies that is saying that, but from my point of view as farmer, the more water we take from under the ground, the more fires we will see, no? So, because nowadays farmers are more looking into how much water are we using for irrigation, no? In order to preserve the water underground.
Well, I haven't studied myself that particular issue. What I can say is that traditional agricultural landscapes tend to create a mosaic of forest patches and agricultural crops, let's say, and therefore that implies that whenever you have a fire, the propagation is much less, let's say, powerful than nowadays, when many previous farm areas have been abandoned, and therefore you have more fuel accumulation, more horizontal continuity of fuels, and obviously when you have a fire, it can spread much easier than that in the past. So that's one aspect, of course, now the mosaic of previous crops that have been abandoned, but that refers mostly to, let's say, marginal agricultural areas, which have been the one most clearly abandoned in the center of Spain. I don't know, in the Mediterranean, I wouldn't say there's so much that effect. And also another important effect, I don't know you cover that, but is the grazing, no? The use of cattle, sheep, goats, which obviously is also related to the demographic transition that we have in the rural areas. And this has a very strong impact because obviously the animals eat quite a bit of fuel. We also have the use of biomass as a source of energy. In rural areas, people tend to warm themselves with wood, no, that they took from the trees. They cut not the whole tree, of course, but they do some thinning, let's say, of the forest. And this is not done anymore because there are no young people that have the capacity of doing that. And that again implies fuel accumulation. And whenever you have fuel accumulation, you have more likelihood to have severe fires.
So the change in meat consumption is also causing, no? Because now the population is eating more and more meat of animals that are concentrated in a warehouse or something, and not eating this meat from sheep that were going.
So yes, it's called extensive grazing, extensive cattle versus intensive one. And the intensive has a lot of environmental impacts, of course, because they are concentrated. They need to be fed from soya and other crops coming from deforested areas. So it's when we say in the media, when we read in the media that every meat is against the environment, I think we should be careful, no? Because there is a strong distinction between extensive and intensive cattle grazing.
Exactly, because all this labor that people taking care of sheep, walking through the mountains for longer. If you go through, for example, to some European South countries, you see like old houses in the middle of the mountains. There are places where in the past los pastores,
the
shepherds were used to sleep with all the sheep, and now we don't find these people anymore because this profession is no longer profitable, no?
Yeah, it's actually interesting that these traditional occupations, such as being a shepherd, could actually help us reduce the occurrence and the intensity, at least, of these wildfires. That's back to the roots kind of infra, right? As a lot of those that we are working on.
Yes. Yeah, well, there has been a strong change, social change in the rural areas in Spain and other European countries, of course. And this has implications, no? And whenever we try to find solutions of the fire issue, it's not simple. There is no simple answers, of course. But we have one hand a biophysical aspect, which is climate change mostly, and then we have a social aspect, which is the change in rural economies and the vast emigration of rural people to cities during the 60s and 70s. And nowadays, we are in the TV in Spain, we are always listening about the empty Spain, and that is true. I mean, there are many places in the center of the country that has now much less population that they used to have 100 years ago. And this is, something tragic to some extent, no?
Yeah, definitely. What would you say is the main cause of wildfires, both globally and in Europe? I know you said earlier that there are various factors, but I've heard, for example, that the main cause is actually human behavior. I don't know if it's pyromaniacs or at least people that, in the Amazon, for example, it's traditionally people that, as you said earlier, want to create spaces for cattle grazing or to grow soy crops. In Europe, probably it's not as easy. And there's also much less forest to burn down because we already deforested a big part of Europe at the end of the day. But still, would you say that the main cause is intentional human behavior, or is it accidents, as you mentioned earlier, or is there no main cause?
Well, it depends on the countries, of course. One of the projects that we are running, this European Space Agency, is dealing with global burn area, and we are analyzing different the impacts of fire in different continents, and the issues are quite different. In tropical regions, the main driver probably is deforestation. People use fire to remove forest. So the tendency there is to use to change, let's say, the agricultural boundary, with fire. In Europe, I would say that the main issue probably is accidents. There are also intentional fires, but that are not as many as people tend to think. The investigation of causes is not that developed, unfortunately. Only half of the fires that occur have a known cause. We have special forces within the civil guard in Spain to investigate the fire causes, but in other countries it's not that simple. You have to go even to a criminal investigation to know what is the real cause of fire. I know from large fires that the diversity of causes is quite various. We also have lighting fires, which in principle is a very small proportion, about 5%, but they may cause large fires because typically they are related to dry storms that occur simultaneously in many places, and they occur in remote areas, and therefore they may cause large fires. While human ones are typically nearby roads or nearby trails, and they are much easier to access, particularly if you are able to get it close enough, let's say. Well, keep in mind that we have about 12,000 fires in Spain every year, and only about 400 are really escaping, let's say. 400 that may burn more than 30 hectares, and only 50 of them burn more than 1,000 hectares. But keep in mind that this summer only 2 fires have burned more than 50,000 hectares.
Yeah, the one in Bejis and the one in Bejis in Castellón that is close to our organic olive plantation. It burned 20,000, and it was caused by a light.
By lighting, yes. That happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, lighting is an important issue, particularly in the interior area of Castellón and Valencia, and also the Iberic, let's say, range. In that region is quite an important. Globally speaking, lighting is important in boreal forest, in Canada, in the US, in the northern part of Europe, and Siberia as well.
to restore, is it true that to restore a Mediterranean forest, it takes less time than to restore, for example, a German forest?
Well, Mediterranean forest is much better.
The vegetation are used to.
Yeah, it's much better adapted, let's say. But
fires.
To fires. But the main issue there is the recurrence of fire and the severity of fires. Of course, if you have a very severe fire that occurs a few years after the previous one, then the chances to get restored that area are much lower. If you have a fire every 40 years or every 50 years and the soil is well preserved, let's say you don't have strong soil erosion, then you can expect that the area will be regenerated. So it depends very much on the conditions of the area, particularly the precipitation, slope, aspect, orientation, the soil conditions, and the severity of the fire.
What is, from your point of view, what is the worst consequence of a wildfire? Apart of the economic part of this could cause to the population, that is obviously very, very bad. But from natural point of view, what is the worst consequence of a wildfire?
I would say the soil erosion, because once you lost the soil, it takes centuries to recuperate. So you have a very severe fire and a very steep slope, and you have a strong rainfall afterwards, and the soil is not protected because you don't have any roots or any branches, to retain the rain, and you lose the soil, then it will be much more difficult.
Just to explain the erosion, maybe you can explain what erosion means, because all the farmers, we know what the erosion, but maybe people in the cities are not so familiar with this word, but it's extremely important to get to know the erosion.
Yeah, the soil is the realm, where everything grows. Well, obviously the soil is formed throughout many millennia, by erosion of the bedrock. So you have bedrocks, and throughout centuries and the action of microorganisms, you have finally organic soil. And once you have organic soil, anything can grow. I mean, obviously adapted to the precipitation, but you don't have soil. Almost nothing can grow on bedrock. Very few plants are able to get the roots.
So there's time to create the materials that you need. The atmosphere.
That's why it's so important to do biological farming, because you recuperate soils that have been severely affected.
I have two last questions, completely unrelated. Maybe let's stick with the wildfire topic for a minute. What can we do to prevent this increase in wildfires and this increasing spread of wildfires when they do occur?
Well, first we have tried. We should try to avoid fire ignitions. Let's say so. Fire ignitions are related to carelessness or intentional fires. Carelessness or accidents, can be reduced by educating population living in those rural areas, and whenever there are risk conditions, they should avoid agricultural practices that may create fires, and that many fires have been caused by accidents occurring in agricultural fields. For instance, one of the worst of the last years occurring in Guadalajara in 2005 that killed 10 persons. It started in a previously crop area that was already, it was harvested already, but there were some, it started with shrubs, I don't remember now the word for that, but the residues, let's say, of crops, and then goes to the shrub, and then went to the trees, and it was a very difficult fire to control, and 10 people were killed as a result of that fire. So what I'm saying is that even agricultural practices that may occur, that people may think that they occur far from forested areas, are risky when the conditions are extreme. So I think that we should educate people on that. In Spain, we haven't had any issue, but in Portugal, there have been strong issues with evacuation. So in 2007, 100 people were killed in Portugal because evacuation was not done properly. They tried to escape, and then they were caught in the road. If they were in their homes, probably it would not happen that. So I think we need to somehow educate people, considering that fire is a natural hazard that we cannot really get rid of that.
Or create a European team that coordinates when a big fire happens. That coordinates.
Well, that's also occurs, but it's not only a matter of extinction. It is more a matter of prevention nowadays. I mean, this is a general agreement that we don't need to buy more airplanes or more helicopters. We really need to invest in people making more aware about the natural hazard of. I sometimes say that when I was in Japan, I observed that everyone there knew what to do in case of earthquake because they are accustomed to earthquakes. It's something that occurs there very frequently. No? But now, I mean, in Spain, nobody knows what to do if there is a fire. We should escape, we should stay at home, we should go up, down, or what, no? So I think we need to educate in the natural hazard that this is going to be there. I mean, it's part of our climate, so we have to live with the risk.
Have to teach children, no, about
children, farmers, everyone, no, that what to do and what would be their contribution, let's say, to reduce fire emissions.
And make sure that there are more people working in rural areas again, no?
Well, yeah, that obviously the revival of rural economy will be really something very helpful. No?
If someone that is listening to this podcast wants to be a shepherd, we will support him or her.
Shepherdess. Okay, so one very last question, Emilio, unless Gonzalo has a pressing one, no? What is the scientific work that you are most proud of, or what project maybe have you participated in or led that you're
the most difficult question for the Finns.
I mean, after such an impressive career, there are so many things that you could probably pick, but maybe on a personal level, you have something that you're especially proud of.
Well, I'm particularly, let's say, proud or happy. I don't know what to say. Probably more happy than proud about my PhD students. I am very enthusiastic about teaching in general, and particularly teaching young researchers. I have last week I read my 42nd PhD. So 42 PhD students are a lot of students, and I am very happy about that because I was able to participate in the career and scientific career of many young people who obviously have been very beneficial to me as well, because I have learned from them a lot. So this way, if
a book or an article that people that are interested in these topics, or climate change or wildfires, can read.
One of your many books or articles.
Well, I don't know what to say. Actually, if they are able to speak in English, I mean to read English, I would recommend the last report of the IPCC, which is very comprehensive. It's available on the web page. It's important to remind that IPCC does not do their own research. They just collect what other people research. So I think the group of people summarizing the IPCC reports are they are smart enough, let's say, to provide a very good summary of what is the state of the art. And the last one was published in 2021. Again, it's available in the web. It's quite thick. I mean, it's about 1,000 pages, something like that. But there are summaries, summary of the different chapters. So I think that would be, from a scientific point of view, what be, let's say, the most appropriate source. This science.
Just to thank you. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for dedicating the time to us. Thank you for dedicating the time to your students. Completely, it was a big honor to have you here, and for all the job that you are doing. Thank you. In name of all the farmers, in name of all Europeans.
Well, the crowd farmers. We'll try to make you an influencer, Emilio.
Let's try.
No, I really congratulate you for this initiative. I think it is really great idea, no, to connect, let's say, people with the real production, the real rural areas, no, and also there's a way to help farmers to be connected with the outside work, which they don't have their own probably means to do themselves. So I think you do a great job.
Thank you so much, Emilio, for being with us today. And thank you for our listeners and viewers also for accompanying us, taking this little field trip into the world of climate change and wildfires. And until next time, bye.
Bye-bye.